Hello everyone, in this video I'll be going over a very simple topic, comments in Python. Even though it's a very simple topic, I wanted to wait until I covered functions and classes to go over this so that I could demonstrate how to use comments properly throughout your entire code. Comments are meant to help explain code and make it more readable. Whatever you are using comments for, make sure they are clear and concise. They are mostly ignored by Python during execution, so you will never have to worry about them consuming resources. There are two different types of comments. The first one is the single line comment. Single line comments start with the pound sign, and you can place them pretty much anywhere in your code. Their purpose is to leave a simple little note somewhere in the code, either to explain how a section of code works, like I have here, 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 and here. It's basically explaining what's happening here. This is where my imports are. This is where I'm creating my ships. This is where I'm assigning the pilots to the ships. And this is basically making a note saying, here's how we're printing out the information of all our ships by passing them into a function. You can also use comments to leave little to-do reminders to remind you that you need to add code somewhere or fix code somewhere. And here's an example right here. And don't mind the color coding, that's just something that VS Code does when it detects the word to-do in all uppercase. That's not something unique to Python. We can also add comments to the end of our code like this. It's perfectly acceptable to add a comment like that as well. We can also use comments to help us when we're debugging our code. Say something is going on with ship 2 and we just want to focus on ship 2 to figure out why it's not working. So we want to prevent everything else from executing because it would just take up space when information is being printed out. And in some cases, if you're dealing with a lot of data, it just might take a little bit longer to run than normal. So what we can do is add a pound sign here to comment out ship 1, add a pound sign here to comment out the assigning of a pilot. And we could technically delete ship 1 here since it's just one ship, but it would be better to comment this out and put a new line right under it temporarily to just print out ship 2. And this way we could just focus on debugging whatever problem might happen to be with ship 2. Simple as that. And then when we're done, I can just delete this line here because we don't need it anymore. Delete that comment. Delete that comment and delete that one, and the code is back to normal and will run everything like normal. So even though commenting is usually mostly for leaving notes and stuff, it is very, very useful for when you're trying to debug your code and you want to stop certain things from executing when you're trying to track down what's causing the issue with your code. Python will completely ignore single line comments. However, they can still serve a functional purpose. The shebang at the top of the main file is one example. If I were to make this file executable through the shell instead of using the command Python, I would need this shebang at the top of the file in order to tell the shell what it needs to use to run this program. In this case, we're basically saying use Python 3. There are also programs that would check comments for unique flags that will indicate how the program should behave. One example is Flake 8, a program that checks Python files for errors, styling issues, and code complexity. It will check single-line comments for flags that indicate which errors it should ignore. How and where you place single-line comments is up to you, and you can put as many of these comments as you want in your code. However, it's best to only place these where absolutely necessary. They are useful for helping developers new to the code to understand what is going on, as well as reminding you how your own code works if you've been away for a while. But try not to drown your code with excessive comments. Remember, comments should be clear and concise. The second type of comment is the multi-line comment. As its name implies, it's a single comment section that spans across multiple lines. They are contained within triple quotes using either single or double quote characters. Now, as you can see, I have a different main file, and the code here we're actually going to execute this time because it's relevant to demonstrating multi-line comments. And on top of that, I'll go ahead and show you the stuff.py file this time. So here's the ship class that we were using in the previous file with its two methods. And then we've got our standalone function here, print ships. And these are multi-line comments here. So I use single quotes, but you can use double quotes as well. And it's basically you start off with 3 single quotes at the top, then you type in your comment, and then you end it with another set of 3 quotes. And this is the typical style of how you would do it. You could technically start the comment right here. It would be totally fine. However, it's recommended to open up your triple quotes, start a new line, then begin typing your multi-line comment. Then end it with a new line, and then close it with the triple quotes again. And as you can see, it's the same here as well as the class here and here and here. And so there's a particular reason why I've placed the multi-line comments where they are. And that is because multiline comments have a functional purpose in Python, and that is providing values for docstrings. Docstrings are string literals that provide descriptive information for classes, functions, and even entire modules. These docstrings can be accessed from within the code through a magic attribute called doc, which, as you can see, I've accessed several doc magic attributes right here. This is why I said that comments are mostly ignored by Python. Multiline comments treated as docstrings will be stored in memory when the program runs. Fortunately, in order for a multiline comment to be treated as a docstring, it must be placed in specific areas within the code, which is why I mentioned earlier that I placed these in specific areas. This is the only way for multiline comments to be treated as docstrings. So because of that, not all multiline comments will be loaded into memory. Now, while docstrings are not required for your code, they can be very useful, especially if you are trying to generate code documentation to go with your program. In fact, there is a Python documentation tool called Sphinx that can take these docstrings and use them to auto-generate your documentation. So real quick, let's go through all the multiline comments I've placed in these two files, and every single one of them are going to be treated as docstrings. So the first one in the main file, this is the docstring that's for the whole main module. It basically describes the entire file. And usually it would give a brief description of the module it's located in. It will probably place information for developers and owners of the code, as well as any copyright and licensing stuff, things like that. That's what goes at the top of each module. And in order for a multiline comment to be treated as a docstring, it must be at the very top, the very first thing of what it's going to be a docstring for in order to be counted as a docstring. Module docstrings, for example, it must be the very first thing inside the module. The one exception to this, of course, is the shebang, because that's not technically Python code, but the docstring has to come before anything that is Python code. Same thing with docstrings for functions, like our main function here. Right after we write def main and close up the parentheses, add the colon, do a new line, the first thing that has to be placed in this function is the docstring if we want it to have one. It must precede any Python code in the function. Same with all other functions, same with classes and class functions as well. And since the multiline comment is the docstring, it's going to be treated as actual Python code. Just to show you, if I delete these tabs, it gets highlighted in red, and that's not just VS Code freaking out about something that it doesn't know about. This will not run. If we try to execute this code, it will give an error saying that there's an indentation missing here. So we have to have that indented. Normal comments, single line comments, they don't have that limitation. So I can say, put a comment here. Python won't have a problem with it because it's not code at all. So in order to print these docstrings out, this is the module doc. So it will print out this. For us to print out the docstring for the main function, we have to say main.doc, and we have to call main without the parentheses. Otherwise, it's going to think that we're trying to call the main function and trying to grab some kind of attribute from a return value, which is not what we're doing. So in order to get to the docstring, we just leave out the parentheses. So here's our stuff.py module. We've got our module docstring at the top here, and we print out the module docstring as soon as we import it. Then we've got our ship class. Here is the class docstring. And then here's our init function with its own docstring as well. Then we've got the function assign pilot. It comes with its own docstring. And then print ships, which also has its own docstring. And to access every single one of those, with the exception of the stuff module docstring, that's going to be printed here. But everyone else, we access them by saying ship.doc to get the class docstring, ship.initdoc to get the initialization docstring, assign pilot to get the docstring for that function, and print ships.doc to get that docstring. So if I run this code, it prints out all the docstrings. And you may have noticed all the new lines and here the indentations as well. It's because even though this is the recommended way to format a multi-line comment, especially for a docstring, this is still being counted as a new line inside of the string. And same with this. The new line here is also being treated as part of the string. And in this case, this is a tab here, so it's going to count that tab as well. Same as with these docstrings as well. So a bit of unfortunate formatting, but we don't typically utilize the docstrings within our own code. It's usually meant for other things. And real quick, because I said multi-line comments have to be the first line in a module function or class or whatever, in order to be treated as a docstring, let me demonstrate what happens when it's not the first line. So I'm going to put the import above this docstring, and then I'm going to execute it. And as you can see here, we get none. And that's because Python cannot find the docstring. We have a multi-line comment. It's just not a docstring because it's not the first bit of code that Python sees when it opens up this module. So if we move this back down here, run the code again, and we've got our docstring again. And an important thing to note, multi-line comments should really only be used for docstrings. Not saying that you can't use them for regular commenting, just that you really shouldn't. In fact, according to PEP 8 guidelines, it is highly recommended to not use multi-line comments for normal commenting. If you need a comment that spans multiple lines to describe your code, then it is recommended to use consecutive single-line comments. Just remember, they should still be clear and concise. I know I said that like 3 times, but it's very important. Clear and concise. After all, it'd be pretty crazy to have a comment spanning 5 lines trying to explain what a for loop is doing to a list of objects. And that's pretty much it for comments in Python. So I hope you've enjoyed this video and found it helpful, and if you did, then please hit the like button and leave a comment below to let me know what you think. And if you want to see more, head on over to Wayfair Coding Academy channel to check out my other content. And while you're there, subscribe to the channel to stay up to date on new stuff as it comes out. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you all next time.